Don't squeal. They're so interested in him. Easy, ladies. Easy, pretty girls. It's okay. What was that? Harlow is a 7-year-old thoroughbred mare that I got in September 2020 following the end of her racing career, when she was just ending her 6-year-old year. She turned 7 this year in April. She ran from the age of 2 until the age of 6 and was imported from Ireland as a 2-year-old to California, where she raced for a few years before coming into Vancouver, British Columbia, and competing out of Hastings Racetrack, where I worked. Does she still have a big booty?
Yeah.
Good girl.
So careful.
She is. Following her retirement from racing, I sent her into the interior of BC where the weather is a little bit drier and gave her the entire winter off. She had from the end of September to the middle of January off in the interior, and then we brought her back up to where I live along the coast of British Columbia, where she had an additional 2 weeks off to settle into her new home before I started on groundwork and other stuff with her. The time off was really good for her adjustment to being barefoot, and it also is really good for just letting her body rest following her racing career and helping her mind come down from the racing atmosphere and get used to living out in a herd. When she came back, she was still quite nervous and difficult to handle, especially for anything relating to riding or groundwork in new areas, especially the open field where we had to really work her in most of the time. All of these videos are following her time off and after she'd been started back into work, so she's definitely not the same horse then as she was when she first arrived. She was very difficult to ride, she was very hot, and she was kind of all over the place and super jumpy. I was actually afraid to ride her for a while because she was so explosive, so we mostly did groundwork, and then once I got her to a baseline level of relaxation, we started going for hacks just at the walk, and the entire goal was just to get her to hack on a loose rein, and this was about for the first couple of months of her coming back into work. When she did finally start to relax more and was more able to handle new things and new environments, that's where I started more stuff with her, and she started to progress really quickly once she hit that baseline level of relaxation. So I got her started over fences and we did lots of hacking and groundwork, and then in June I sent her to my friend for a couple of weeks to go work on the water treadmill, because water is really good for building muscle in a low intensity way, and it's also really good for building strength in the SI. And since she had been galloped at the racetrack in an elevator bit and was so inverted and afraid of contact on the bit, I wanted to send her to do some strength training for her hind end to help repair any long-term pain or soreness or weakness that she could have built up. And then more recently, after she'd had her 2 weeks of the water treadmill, she had another additional 3 weeks off just because I was dealing with some stuff and was also super busy with work. So then I just recently brought her back into work after a couple of weeks off. And actually this bridleless ride here is after she'd had 2 weeks off, and I'd ridden her once or twice before this, and this is following a day off. So I think that this really speaks for how much she's developed mentally and how much she has calmed down, because honestly, like, if I had tried this several months earlier, she literally would have killed me. We would have been in Texas right now. Also given her time off because we had a heat wave quite recently where our temperatures were way higher than they ever are, and unfortunately during the heat wave she lost some condition, so I'm not fully happy with how she looks condition wise right now, but we're putting it back on and getting her back into a program, and she's eating her food and doing really great, so that's awesome. But she's a pretty big mare. She's 16 too, so she is a big girl, and she's a very sensitive girl with very sensitive skin, so the heat kind of just made her sweat out all of her condition, and she lost more weight and muscle than what a less sensitive horse might have, which is a bit disappointing. But I am glad that we're kind of back on track and that she's doing so well mentally, because the physical stuff for her as such an athletic horse is actually quite easy, but the mental stuff and becoming this quiet has been the biggest struggle for her, and it's taken a lot of work and a lot of patience because she's a naturally more neurotic and nervous horse, especially since at the racetrack she had grown so used to such discomfort being galloped in an elevator bit. And she is a strong horse, and I can imagine how strong she would have been to gallop at the racetrack. I never galloped her, but I can imagine. And I can see why, for safety purposes, why a rider might have wanted her in something like that, but it really messed up her reaction to contact and people riding her. So it took a lot to undo that.
Let's go out the gate. She's like, I will take myself back to the barn. Good girl. Watch out for this thing. Good girl. Ho. 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 She's like, I'm gonna touch Pogo's butt. Come here. Good girl. Snack. Good girl.
Interesting thing about her is that while she wasn't aggressive or mean to people, she was just very standoffish in the beginning and wasn't particularly interested in hanging out with people. So it took quite a while to kind of get her to the point where she actually enjoyed seeing people. And then once she got to that point, she was given the name Berber because whenever she saw people coming, she would do this really deep, throaty nicker that sounded like Berber. And she still does it, like for even little things, like when you're opening the trailer to get her out and she sees you, she'll do it. It's really cute.
Literally Jekyll and Hyde, like watch. They're gonna go flat back in a second when she decides that the distance she was always walking beside him is too close. But it's his fault, not hers. Yeah, there we go. See? Nope. And then you lean back. Forward.
Jackson.
Forward. Back. You live with him. She's like, that's exactly why I hate him. He doesn't pull his weight. Never does the dishes.
Doesn't pick up his...
Given her level of tension and anxiety when I got her, I think she held a lot of tension and soreness for a while, especially pertaining to how hollow she would have been carrying herself when she was in an elevator bit. So we've done a lot of like massage and chiro, and that's also why she had the water treadmill training and whatnot. And that's also why I like practicing stuff like the bridleless with her, because I think it's really important for helping her learn how to use her body and learn that she has autonomy over her body and that she's not going to be muscled into a certain frame or position using pressure for compliance and increasing levels of pain. The elevator bit really made her pull very sore, and her entire neck was like rock hard and rigid, and we're still working through some of that tension and just getting her to supple up. But it was so bad that she didn't really like being groomed anywhere, and she did not like her head and ears being touched, and she was very much a head shaker and just wasn't happy. If you touched her in the wrong spot, she would try to turn and bite you. I did also treat her for ulcers, so I do think that definitely played a role in her level of comfort being groomed all over her skin. But basically, grooming wasn't a particularly enjoyable experience for her initially, and she didn't really like being touched basically anywhere, even if you're doing it lightly. She just didn't like it. Like even her legs, her neck, her shoulder. She wasn't very girthy or anything like that, which people would typically attribute to ulcers, but she just didn't like it. So all of that stuff has taken so much work, and honestly, more so than the riding and the handling, the stuff on the ground and seeing how much more interactive and happy she is with people, that's the most rewarding part of working with her, because those are the things we struggled with the most, was the groundwork and her general way of seeing people and her general desire to be touched and handled. Like initially she wouldn't even really take treats. It took a while to get her to take treats and realize that they are fun. And she's still quite picky. I still haven't gotten her to eat an apple, and I know for a fact that she would like it, but she just will not take it. And I know that she will like it when she does. She'll eat carrots, and she really likes carrots. And then there's a couple of dry treat brands that I've tried giving her that she likes and will eat, and she's gotten a lot more adventurous with taking those. But with like certain types of fruits, she's just not there yet, and she just needs to learn. So we are trying, but she's a picky little girl. Anyways, initially my plan was to have her as a resale project, and now I'm not really sure if she is going to be a resale project. It'll be a longer term one because I want to get her going more. I think she's very talented over fences and a very naturally talented jumper. She's not jumped a ton. Most of the work I do with her is flat work, so she's done very little jumping and a few off-property schoolings and whatnot, so she's still quite green over fences, but she's very naturally brave and has really good natural technique. I'm going to start schooling her more over fences and trying to develop her more as a jumper, but I want to get that baseline level of flat work back, especially since she had some time off and lost some condition from the heat wave. So that's kind of my goal for her for the summer, is just to get her more consistent on the flat and more supple side to side, and then start developing her further up the levels as a jumper and hopefully get her out to some shows. She still needs more practice off property because that's where she's more nervous and where she kind of struggles more, but she's still a far cry from the horse that she used to be. So while I'm not sure if she will be sold one day, that's not the current plan for her anytime soon, because I'm having a lot of fun producing her. And I'm also very glad that she ended up with me, because with how she was and how flighty and kind of dangerous she was to ride initially, and just how stressed she was, I know that there's a lot of places she could have ended up that wouldn't have necessarily had her best interests at heart, or would have tried to rush her, or would have tried to make her stop being high-headed by putting her in draw reins or a stronger bit, or just trying to manufacture a certain position for her by using equipment rather than dealing with the mental component of it. And so I'm really glad that she ended up with me because of that. But yeah, her biggest change has been mentally. Like, as you can see here where I'm grooming her, she's actually moving her lips, which you can kind of see. She's not a super obvious horse unless you get like a really good spot, but just the fact that she would stand for grooming now and enjoy it, that's like pretty huge for her. She used to just not like it at all. Sometimes I hate him, but sometimes I'm super into him. He's a wonderful thing. Yeah. Like, this is, oh, she's peeing again. Harlow, come on. For Percy?
Yeah, really? Come on.
You can't heighten the standards?
She's like, yes.
Harlow, you could fit him in your purse. I often get asked like what her training program is, or what the other horses I ride and like what their training program is. And with my personal horses, it's constantly fluctuating because they don't take precedence. I have to do all my client horses first. And with that said, with the nervous horses, it's not a huge priority to get them in a specific program where they're doing the same thing every day, because I'm of the mind that I ride the horse that I have on any given day. I'm not the type of person who is going to stick to a strict program just for the sake of sticking to something, because that's not really what I do. I ride the horse that I have on a given day, so if she's having a day where she's more tired or more stressed, even if the plan was initially to jump her, I'm not going to. Or if she's having days where she's tired of going in the arena, we'll go for a hack instead. Or if it's too hot, I might do a lunge or some groundwork instead. It really depends. I usually get her out between 3 to 5 days a week, and I try to do a hack day once a week if I'm not too busy. If I'm busy, that kind of gets thrown out and we just do arena work and whatnot. But since she lives outside and she has so much space to kind of do her own thing, it's not like I'm really anal retentive about getting her out X number of times a week, other than to just maintain her current level of fitness, and 3 days a week is plenty for that currently. So her training is mostly focused on flat work and general relaxation and just building up that suppleness, and we do some stretches on the ground after her rides and whatnot. But but the focus of her training is just developing that baseline level of strength. So we do a lot of trot pulls, ground pulls, lots of like leg yielding, bending exercises, carrot stretches on the ground. And then when she's jumping, the focus right now is kind of just doing some grid work. Off property, it's working on like speed and bringing her back and like lots of half halts and just slowing down. At home, she's not fast at all, so I don't really practice that with her at home because we have the opposite problem where I would like her to be a little bit more forward. But like I said, jumping isn't the main focus right now at all. Like we pop her over a couple of single fences here or there, but I'm just looking to get her more developed and strong on the flat now, especially since she lost condition during the heat wave, and I want her to have more top line. She had a really nice top line and was quite beefy before, so I am very disappointed about that if you can't tell. But yeah, mostly her training program is just kind of getting her out and exposed to things, keeping her brain happy because her brain has been her biggest struggle. Physically, she's a very athletic and adaptable horse, but mentally, she has more struggles. As for her equipment, right now I've been riding her in scoot boots, so she is barefoot. She's barefoot other than when I'm riding her, I'll put them on. The cycle before this, I had her in Duplo shoes, which are these rubber shoes that have frog support, so they help the hoof maintain the same type of function it would barefoot because the frog is getting support. I might put those back on her just for ease of use if we're going to be showing, but she has pretty good feet and she doesn't need them, so the scoots are easier for now, but they might go on if we're showing or if we're hacking off property a lot just because they're a little bit easier, or if she starts to wear down her hooves too much now that she's out on the field with Percy and Pogo. Milo, Banksy, and then Janae's new horse Peanut are all out on a different field, which is why Harlow was able to come to my house and go out with Percy and Pogo, because then we don't have to worry about her being out with a colt like Banksy, which would be a terrible idea. So she's been living with Percy and Pogo, and surprisingly enough, she likes living with the boys better, despite the fact that they definitely harass her more. She was top mare in the field with the other mares and was kind of mean to them sometimes, but with the boys, she lets them bully her, even though she kind of has like a mid place and she will stand up for herself a little bit. She lets them bully her, kind of, and she really likes being out with the boys, which is a little odd because she was so kind of standoffish and not super nice to the girls, but she's enjoying it a lot. And then once Banksy gets gelded, I guess, he's going to get his shit rocked by her because she doesn't tolerate BS. But yeah.
Okay, so anyways, I asked on my Instagram story if anyone had any questions that they wanted me to answer for this video, because I realized that I've really not updated much on these horses or my horses at all this year to the extent that I have in years prior, so people don't really know Harlow all that well, so I wanted to answer a few questions. One of the most common questions I got are like what my short and long-term goals are for her, or just what my goals are for her in general. And honestly, like especially for a horse like this, we've been through a lot. She had a lot of struggle and tension and mental trauma and stuff that we were working through to get her relaxed. So realistically for me, my goals are all short term because I like to plan for what's actually realistic in the near future for her. I can look and say like, hey, it would be cool if one day we could do this, but in terms of like actually setting a hard and fast goal, I want it to be realistic things that she can reasonably accomplish that are fair to her. So short term, like I mentioned in the video, I would like to get her out to a show or two this year. I think that would be great, and I think that's a reasonable goal to get to, so long as I have enough time to keep her fit and prepare her to get to a show. Long term, she's a very talented horse. She's a very talented jumper. She has a lot of power and a lot of scope. It would be really cool to be able to get her into the big rings, especially as a thoroughbred, because people are so discriminatory to the idea of thoroughbreds actually being able to compete against warm blood types over bigger fences. So for my own vanity, I think that would be amazing because I just love thoroughbreds and I love to show people what they can do. And I think she's the type of horse that would be able to hold her own in that situation. But that depends on a number of things. Like I'd have to get her prepped to continue moving up the levels. She'd have to be fit, sound, and ready to go, and also mentally sound to go around and go to shows like that.
But for a long-term kind of like pipe dream type goal, that would be great. It also depends on my ability to afford to do these types of things. But I think that would be a really cool thing to do with her. But short term, basically, it's just getting her more consistent on the flat, developing her more through the dressage levels. I would like to get her out to some dressage shows as well, and then jumping shows too. And basically kind of just doing a little bit of everything with her. Lots of trail riding, lots of hacking. I kind of want to go camping with the horses sometime this year if I have time, and I would probably take her because I think it would be good for her. So yeah, it depends on a number of things, but like my short-term goals with her are kind of just getting her out and about a little bit more, getting her more experience. Over the fall and winter, I want to join the local hunt club and take her out on the hunts. They're just drag hunts. We're not hunting any real animals. Don't freak out anybody. Stuff like that, just kind of getting her out and exposed and learning about her new job, and that being in a new and exciting environment doesn't mean it's the racetrack. It doesn't mean that it's always like a get up and go mentality, kind of just teaching her about that type of stuff. Another question I got lots, and I get lots about her every time I post something basically, is if I'm going to sell her. Right now, she's not for sale. I'm not planning on selling her right now. I don't like answering questions about any horse basically where people look at me and they're like, oh, are you going to keep them forever? Because like, I'm not a magician. I can't see the future. I didn't see my business taking off how it has. I didn't see myself getting a new truck or a trailer this year, and that happened. So the way I see it is I just kind of have to see how things happen. Milo and Banksy take precedence over her. So if it was a situation where I had to sell a horse, I would be selling my sales projects first, which she is not technically one of them right now. But if I had to sell more than just those guys, then I would probably have to look at either leasing or selling her. But currently, that is not the plan. I would like to produce her as a show horse for myself. Milo is still dealing with his hoof issues, and his stifle has been bothering him a little bit, the locking stifle, because I haven't had the time to keep the number of horses that I own in work. So he's out with Banksy right now on pasture because that keeps him moving around, and then his locking stifle doesn't bother him because he's using it. And it also allows him to continue developing sole and for us to keep fixing his ankles without him being on hard ground. Plus, I actually kind of need him there because without a responsible supervisor for daycare, Banksy kind of is a bit of a shithead to the horses. So he needs an older horse to put him in his place. So Milo is on babysitting duty right now. And then I'm using Harlow as the riding horse that I ride for myself currently, because I just do not have time to keep them all in work. It's too much. So kind of right now, that's the plan for her, is just to kind of stay here, and I want to keep producing her as a show horse because as far as jumping goes, she's more bold than Milo. She's more scope, and she's just more naturally gifted at it. She's a better hind end. His front end is more consistent than hers, but he's got way more experience. So as she starts to get better at what she does, she is going to be more physically talented than him. Even though I still think he's a very talented jumping horse, I think she's better, and mentally she's in a better place to excel at the sport than he is, just because she's not nervous. He's a more standoffish and nervous horse defenses, and even though he's come leaps and bounds with his stopping problem, it's still more of a struggle for him, and he struggles more in that type of environment. So she's going to be a more consistent and dependable horse for what I want to do, so that's why I'm focusing on her right now, especially since he's had struggles this year with his ulcers, his feet, and other things. There's just no point in me trying to like rush him into the show ring at this point. I just want to make sure he's feeling his best before I do something like that. Otherwise, I'm going to blow it and ruin his association with showing by poisoning it with discomfort. So she's going to kind of take that place for the time being, at least, while he is a babysitter and while we work on rehabbing his feet more. Another question I got is how Harlow is on trails. Honestly, she's a really good trail horse. She's the type of horse now that she's gotten over all the initial tension and anxiety that she had excess amounts of. She's the type of horse now, like even if something scares her, she's pretty bold and she'll keep going. Like you can get her to go past, over, or through things that she's afraid of, because she'll look at them and she'll be unsettled, but she'll just do it if you ask her to. So she's a really good trail horse from that standpoint. She does get like a little bit jiggy and nervous like when other horses are going fast. So most of her anxiety is like pertaining to seeing other horses, which is why I need to get her out to like off-property environments with other horses more so that she can get used to it and not associate it with the racetrack and thinking that she's gonna have to like run. So she's really solid on trails and brave in like unpredictable situations. She's not a very spooky horse. Even when she was very anxious, oddly enough, she wasn't very spooky in the sense that like she literally like has knocked wheelbarrows onto herself or like had things fall on her, and she doesn't care about stuff like that, like even if she's tied up. But then she'll kind of like be weird about like horses running in a field next to her and the tail will go straight up and then she's like piaffing down the road. But no, she's a pretty solid trail horse, and honestly she's not a very spooky horse. Like all of her anxiety and tension is kind of just like environmental, and it like builds and builds, and it's just because of her general association with having like uncomfortable equipment and also like a super high stress job where the struggles she was having were largely trying to be solved using equipment rather than getting to the bottom of why she's expressing the behavior in the first place. I also got lots of questions about how I dealt with her anxiety and explosiveness, and I'm going to talk about that more in another video that I'll do on her transformation eventually. But basically just lots of patience. Like honestly, the biggest thing for her is the fact that like unlike what a lot of people would do when they're in a rush, and honestly unlike what I would probably be pushed to do if the horse didn't belong to me, where the client would probably either take the horse out of my program if I wanted to move as slow as I did with her, or they'd be pressuring me to do more. Unlike that, like I just took my time. Like we did like several weeks of groundwork when she was super explosive, because I got on the first time and she like exploded into a bronching fit because the skirt of my jacket brushed over her bum. And it was enough where I was like, I can't afford to get injured by this, and also I do not want to ride through this. Like I don't want to break my neck trying to deal with this stuff. So I got off and I did groundwork for weeks after that, and then when she was at like a baseline level where I thought she'd be half decent, I got back on her and we just hacked. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the patience to do that. It's something very simple, honestly. It's not like overly complex. It was just being patient and working through the anxiety and putting myself in a position where I can more easily give her support and rewards from the ground and handle the situation in a way that's less dangerous for myself and also a little bit more comforting for her. And that really helps. But I'm going to go into more detail in the future video that I will do where I talk about like the actual protocol I used and like what we did day to day in the beginning. This video is already kind of long, so I'm not going to include it in this one because I'd rather go in more detail and do a better job of it in a dedicated video. But basically, in short, just patience. That really helped, just being patient and like giving her the time she needed to kind of let down, learn about her new job, and realize that what she thought was going to happen wasn't going to happen, and that it was a way lower stress job. And basically like, hey, like instead of like get on and go, we're doing hurry up and wait, basically, where we go and we're just walking. It's just gonna be chill, it'll be fine, relax, basically. And then for anyone interested in looking up her pedigree or anything, her racing name is Fast Bid, and if you go and look it up on Equibase or pedigreequery.com, you can see the full pedigree there. She is Irish bred, so a lot of the horses in her pedigree aren't super common in pedigrees of North American horses out here. So yeah, she's got a really cool pedigree. I quite like her. I've gotten a couple of horses with some Irish breeding now, and I really like the type that they throw. And they've all been really good jumpers. So I'm a fan of that. The last question I'll answer that I will also go into more detail in the follow-up video on her transformation is what I feed her. So basically, she mostly gets hay. I feed free choice hay to all of my horses. They always have hay in front of them. And then in the beginning when I first got her, she came back and she lost weight over the winter because the people that had her had quarter horses. So I think that they thought that like what we were feeding her was already a lot, but she did lose some condition, which is normal when they're coming off the racetrack, especially because they're on like such an insanely high grain diet. But so I had her on more grain when I got her back than I typically would. And I feed, like in Canada, we have a lot of different grains than what they feed in the US. We don't have basically any of the main brands that Americans are feeding their horses. But I feed the Otter Co-op high fat pellet. It's called Equical, and it's just like a high fat pelleted grain that you can feed to horses who are a little bit of harder keepers. So basically every horse that I get off the racetrack, I put onto that. And they start off on a higher amount of it, and then I gradually wean them back as they start to have like their metabolism shift. And this is why free choice hay is so important, because I want them to be eating hay most of the time. And then also with the pellet, I will soak alfalfa cubes, which is still a forage because it's alfalfa. I'll soak them, mix it together, and then I put like an oil, the O3 Animal Health oil, some rice bran, and then like zinc, copper, biotin for their feet. This is my cat. And then mix it all together. I sometimes have like a pelleted vitamin supplement, or I'll put like a little bit of a ration balancer in to cut it, because then when I start to wean them off of like the higher fat grain, then I can start to like keep them on the ration balancer instead. So anyways, that's what I did for her. Now she is on a lot less grain than she was. So I feed my horses once a day. They'll get the soaked cubes, so it's like a mash, which is really good for the summertime because then you can force them to drink more water. Soaked cubes, she still gets some of the high fat grain, but it's like, I don't know, she probably gets like 500 grams of the high fat grain a day, if that. And then I've started giving her some oats because with the heat and stuff, she's a little bit lazy. So I wanted some of the va-va-voom from feeding her a little bit more starch. But she only gets like half a cup of oats. It's not very much. And then she still gets the rice bran and the oil. And then I also have a forage based pellet grain that I got. So it's not technically a grain because it's like forage based, so it's a forage. And I give her that mixed in with her grain as well, because then it just kind of allows me to start cutting back the high fat again once she kind of plateaus at the weight that I want her to. So it's nothing super exciting. I'll do a video where I actually show what the grains are, and then I can show the supplements, or like how I feed the supplements and how I mix them all in and stuff. And I'll do that in her transformation video, or I'll do a separate like what I feed my horses video again, because it's constantly changing. Basically, in short though, I try to feed as little grain as possible because it's not super good for them. You don't want high grain diets. And even with a horse who's like a sensitive hard keeper like her, if you do it correctly, you can wean them onto less grain and have them predominantly just on hay with a very little bit of grain and some good quality supplements, and they can do really, really well on that. I've done it on several horses now that I used to have to feed a lot of grain in the beginning. It is possible, I promise you. So yeah, I'll talk more about that in another video though. I hope that this video gave people a little bit more insight on what Harlow is like, because I know that like I clearly quite like her, but people don't have the same concept of like who she is as a horse as I do, because I actually get to see and handle her all the time, whereas I haven't really shared that much of her journey on here because I've just been so busy and life has been so hectic. So I hope that this gives people some more clarity on what she is like as a horse and gives them some answers to questions. But if anyone has more questions, I'm happy to answer more in the comments or in another video. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to my channel. I'm sorry that this video is not going to be like as structured, especially the question portion of it. It's been busy. Life has been hectic. I've had a lot of life changes and a lot of busy business stuff. So I've been working lots, and then I just kind of got burnt out of the whole social media thing, especially dealing with like difficult people online. That really soured it for me. And then during all of that, it was just like I just got out of like a really long-term relationship over a month ago. That should have ended sooner, but that's okay. So yeah, that was hard. And then after that, I was just so burnt out with working and like doing all the social media stuff and then dealing with that stuff, and it was just too much. So I needed a break, and that's kind of why I went MIA. And I know that online I typically have been super active quite consistently over the years, but I just was so burnt out that I just needed to take a step back. And even now it's kind of just hard to psych myself up to like do these things. right now because I've been trying to do more stuff for myself in my free time so that my life doesn't literally just revolve around work. So yeah, that's kind of why I've been out and about and all over the place and posting less on my social channels. It's not because I'm dying or anything, it's because I'm just burnt out and I wanted to focus on more things that were like actually just for me, and kind of just focus on getting my work done and not adding more to my plate. So anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. I have a lot of exciting things in the work. I haven't posted a lot on YouTube about it, but I'm releasing these bridles for horses that are anatomical bridles that aren't a drop noseband or a crank noseband or have a flash. So if you want to check those out, you can go on my website and check it out down in the link in the description, and they're really cool. I'll also be doing a video when their official release is coming. I'm getting everything together. We've done pre-orders. The pre-orders are now sold out. The pre-order bridles will ship out first, and those will be coming in the coming few weeks to ship out eventually for those of you who might have ordered them. But I'm really excited about those. That's like my big business thing that has been going on and been super busy and stressful, along with all the training stuff. So it has been a lot, but I highly recommend checking it out, and I really appreciate your guys' support, and thank you for watching my channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you for bearing with me during this transformational time for me. So thanks.